So we talked about this. So I'm going to talk about the topic of entrepreneurial crawls, stalls, and falls, and how to avoid them. This topic, might resonate with you in a couple of ways, depending on which side of the spectrum you are. I know there's a few of you who are in turnarounds and mergers and acquisitions. So, if you're evaluating companies, you might find something here that are signs of whether you ought to keep them in your consideration set or not. And if you're like many others that I've heard on a call, are looking to continue to grow or maybe expand your business, whatever it is, whether it's in the insurance side or legal or whatever else that you do, or in IT services, what are some of the signs that you can look for as you continue to do that? Because sometimes we have our own blinders and they can come back and bite us. And what I have to share is from my own personal experiences. So many of the things I'll talk about, I've made those mistakes myself. So let's talk about crawls. What are the symptoms? I'll go through this fairly quickly in the interest of time. But the symptoms are, you have a vision, a mission, roadmap, plan, whatever it is. You've read some books on lean startup or solution selling or whatever. You're proud of your world-class team. Usually it's you, and you have free coffee and donuts, although it may not be as relevant in today, but you may still have the Red Bull around. So, these are things, especially, if you see some of the exuberance in the startup heydays from California, it was all about a lot of, sort of positioning and a lot of this bluster. But in reality, you have very little product or service to show. The product or service is not resonating. The competition just released, whatever you thought was like super important, or whatever service thing that was critical to capturing the market, they just came out with that. And in your heart, you know that you're way too late to the market, or you whatever the market that you're looking to expand has passed you by. So what are some of the things that you can do to recognize? So let's talk about the causes. There's a number of things. The first one is customer confusion. It's customer versus channel. So sometimes you want to direct sell, sometimes you work with channel partners, and unless you're really clear what the difference is, how you're going to compensate your channel versus how you will use direct, this can cause some confusion both in the channel side as well as on the customer side. The other one is what I call the puppy dog syndrome, which is, I could come to you and say, I have this yellow furry animal that's really cute, and the bonus, it's potty trained. Would you buy this? And the assumption is we're talking about a puppy dog, but I could pretty much make the same statements about a furry cat. And so if you've got the wrong sort of customer who's maybe a cat lover, you don't even have a product. So I know that being a little bit facetious, but there's a lesson in there and something to really think. Then there's scope confusion is again, especially this happens when we're trying to expand, is, what is really the minimum that we need to do? When I talk product, I also mean services, because some of you are also the services business, but it's really, what is the minimum? Then there's this whole sort of role confusion, especially if you're working with a co-founder or with other partners. Who's on first? Or this thing about, no, it's not my job, somebody else has got it, or it's everyone else's job, which means it's no one's job. Then there's deliverable confusion, and this usually happens when you have a slightly bigger company and you have a sales force, and the sales team is coming and saying, in order to win this one big deal, we really need, you product team or whoever, to build this feature now so we can make billions of dollars. And that's called the whale syndrome. And we experienced that. I experienced that in dealing with Walmart, where it was one big customer, but then you end up with such a custom product or service that it's difficult for you to service anyone else, and they could take up pretty much all of your time. And then the last thing is you don't have enough money or resources. I put the bullet, this is visual thinking most of the time, because the reality is, of course, you never ever will have enough time, money, scope, whatever, to do all of the grand plans they're dreaming of. That's never is the case. So it's being really hardcore. Sometimes people call it ruthless priorities, being hardcore. And on the other hand, if it's something that's really important and worth funding, then you will find funding. One of the earliest books that I read was this book called Guts and Other People's Money. So how do you leverage other people's money to get to what you want to deliver? So what are some of the solutions? I think in the customer bucket is sort out the business model and customer. Like I said, is it with the channel? Do you have channel conflicts or any other partner conflicts? Know your customer, and we talked about this in the example I gave it, and Bill shared. Understand the latent needs, and there's this thing that nowadays coffee cups have become common in cars, but if someone had not gone out and observed people's morning routines and how they get into the cars and spill coffee, you would never have coffee cup holders, right? So that's a latent need. No one tells you that I need a coffee cup in my car, but it's a latent need. So you have to discover it. Scope confusion is this delivering a point of irrefutability. That's what the VCs call. Is it at some point, are you convincing not only yourself, but the people that want to invest in you, or if you're doing due diligence for a turnaround, is it really irrefutable that in terms of this is a viable business, that it'll continue to grow, the pie will get bigger, all of those. And then the other thing is to deliver chunks of value, especially engineers like to think that they just release some code or components that their job is done, and they fail to think that what the end-to-end solution is. On the role confusion, there's and I mentioned Patty Azzarella's book earlier. She has another book called Rise, and she talks about building the team you need, not the team you have. I know sometimes we value our relationships, and that's important, but it's also important to think through what's really needed for the team that you must have in order to grow, and not what you currently have. And don't be afraid to shy away from those open and respectful but hard conversations. As parents, and especially of teenage children, whatever, we probably experience that. The same holds, even in business relationships, is, it's all great when everyone's singing Kumbaya, but I'll talk about this maybe if you have time, about intellectually being honest, is to learn to speak up where you must. On the deliverable confusion, clarify what's urgent versus important for this release. Whatever you're currently working on, is this something that's really super critical? And then use a framework. OKR stands for objectives and critical results. But what are your goals, and are you measuring towards your results? There's this thing about don't confuse activity with results, right? So are you just doing a bunch of busy work? And I know you're all successful business people, so you're certainly not doing that. But also look at whether your partners are doing that, and if you don't, then hold them accountable and have those hard conversations on the results that they need to deliver for your success. And if you don't have enough money or resources, fix the other issues, and then fundraise for what you truly need. And you really don't need a PowerPoint. You don't need a big thing. I know this is back in the day, but a company I worked for, Compaq, was literally built on a napkin idea. So, and that also happens even today. So, if you're able to articulate, and if this was in person, I would have actually been whiteboarding, because I really don't need PowerPoint to articulate my ideas, because it's clear in my head. And I think that's the clarity we should all strive for in our own area, right? I'm not saying in general we can't be experts in everything, but what we are confident about our material, whatever the business or something we're selling, don't use things like PowerPoint or slides as crutches. It should come from your heart, and that shows in the in your genuine, how you deliver, right? I think that's I think we all can relate to that. Okay, on stalls, your symptoms. You have a network of contacts, maybe from your alumni, maybe from this group or whatever, and you have warm interest to people with cash, and some of you have. I think I heard one of you, maybe it was Jeff, talk about incubation and support and so on. So you have all of that, but what you don't have is the calls are not getting returned, the meetings are getting rescheduled, or VCs are famous for never saying yes, but they'll never say no. But they'll always say, yeah, well, maybe we should have one more meeting. And then they have these other things like, we'll invest if XYZ investor or joins your team. So if you've heard any of these things before, and in whatever scenario, then there's likely you're in the stall state. So what are the causes? Your unclear value proposition. Your story may be too complex. You may be just doing too much of boiling the ocean, or it's just not in their wheelhouse. It may be an important area for them to think about, but they just don't invest in that category or in the stage of your business. The third one is an even more fundamental thing, is they just don't believe you. And they're probably not going to tell that to your face, but that's why all of this, let's have one more meeting, or we'll invest if XYZ joins, is really an indication that there's some kind of trust issue. And it's not maybe in you personally, but it's really around, say, your business model, or inherently there's some value prop, or maybe even some team issues. Or it's the wrong contact. The person you're trying to impress may be too level, and they need to get permission from their leadership. Or they're just looking to invest in something similar, and they're concerned about it being competitive or whatever. Sometimes they'll tell you, but often they'll just be quiet. So what are some of the solutions? Unclear value proposition. Here's a picture of Guy Kawasaki. He was one of Steve Jobs' early evangelists, and he had this 10, 20, 30 rule, which is 30-point font and 10 slides and things like that, and 20 minutes for your presentation. But it's a good rule to keep in mind, is can you get through your material in a short term, because especially nowadays, there's a lot of, people's attention spans can be distracted. And then, unclutter, and I think even Jobs said that, is that, you've kind of achieved greatness when you look at your product and know there's nothing else you can take away, as opposed to adding. So, core versus context is what's really core to your business versus everything else that's sort of ancillary or context, right? If you're sort of, and I'll just pick on Bill, but his business is around, providing this core technology. Oops. Sorry for jumping ahead. But you want to think about other partners that you need, but you don't want to get into their business, and that's usually where conflicts arise. If you think something is not in the wheelhouse, then nowadays with LinkedIn and other things, it's a Crunchbase, whatever. There's lots of ways to find out about, do the research and find someone who's more hungry for what you have to offer. There's a story around it, but if you have time, we might do that. I have shared that with Bill. But anyway, it's really sort of making sure you match, who you're trying to sell to, or you're trying to get excited about your idea to invest in you. In terms of whether they don't believe you, validate your business model from what I would say the bottoms up. It's very good to get into this allure of top down and say, yeah, it's $1 billion business, it's a $2 billion business. It fine, but if you are a small team, it's very hard to believe that you will become a $1 billion business overnight, right? But I can sort of believe that you will be at least $500,000 business. Can you even show me that? And then maybe $1 million and so on. So it's building on those things, as opposed to some grandiose points. And if you can say, yes, here are 10 potential customers or 10 partners, whatever, and this is how you grow, then that's, as an investor, that's more trustworthy to me than any slide that shows something is $3 or $5 billion. And then, validate. I mean, don't hesitate to talk to strangers. You'd be surprised how people are willing to talk to you if you just ask them. Ask them nicely, of course, and try to also offer something in return. But ask, and people will share. In terms of the wrong contact, again, back to doing research and get your contact to redirect and make sure. And for those of you in sales, and I think all of us are in sales to some extent, right? One of the things that Dad told me is don't forget to ask for the signature. Don't forget to close the deal. Stop talking once the customer says yes, right? So those are things that are important. And again, do your research. The last thing on the falls, here are some of the symptoms, and this is probably the time you're looking to have some of the people in this room where you want to get them to help you, scrounge whatever or recover whatever you can, because you're already in that state where it's going to be really hard to make it. So you have some money, you have some IP and product assets, you have a great team, but end of the day, there's little or no traction, and employees are bailing, they're leaving ship, right? So, the causes are basically, if you had been following along, you just have an unsellable product. Customers are not buying, or they're not, they may buy into your idea in a pilot, but they're not converting to revenue. And, you have a single customer, like you're building a product for one thing, but not something that's repeatable. In software engineering, there's a thing that, the revenue is in the nth copy, right? It's like more copies of software you sell, then that's where you get the revenue. And let's face it, I mean, there are just factors you can't control. I had my startup and, 9/11 happened, COVID happens right now. So there's stuff, there's things like the 2008 recession that many of us can remember, and then this family situation. So things, we have to juggle all of that. And sometimes it's not possible to do that and do the things of growing your business or whatever. So what do? Pivot to a new business, and consider a fire sale. I mean, try to make lemonade out of a lemon, whatever. Plan for a graceful exit, and yes, try again. You all from childhood may remember the story about Robert Bruce and the spider, and how he got inspired about the spider trying to build a web over and over again until it was successful. So I think that's something for all of us to keep in mind. So finally, to wrap up, and I know I went through a lot of things very quickly, but hopefully some of this resonated. It does come to this right mental attitude, and you'll have probably seen a slide similar to this, that attitude is 100% of success if you just, equate the letters to numbers and add that up. So to me, it's comes down to sort of a sharper definition about attitude in these three areas. Is honesty, humility, and hunger. So honesty is to not, I know we're all intrinsically honest in terms of knowing right from wrong, but it's also being intellectually honest and like I said, being able to, if you see something that doesn't sound right or smell right, or you don't understand it, like Bill, I think, was being intellectually honest by saying, look, I don't understand cryptocurrency. Maybe there's a business, I know there are people making trades on it, but if I don't get it, that's not something I'm comfortable. And I think just having that courage to speak up is important. Humility, it doesn't mean that you should be subservient or just kind of say yes to everything. On the contrary, I think humility is to go with that attitude. And I think Michael Dell, incidentally, just released a book or is about to release a book about being a nice guy but still win, right? So I don't want anyone to take humility to mean that you're not intent on winning, but it is to also have that attitude of you're everybody can contribute, everybody can come up with a good idea. So being open, and another thing from a cartoon character in the past is be like Curious George, right? George, like keep your ears wide open and always be curious to learn. And that gets to the last point about hunger, and Steve Jobs talked about being hungry, right? Is have that that passion, that fire in the belly. Again, as someone who has mentored or invested or done things, if I don't detect passion in the belly, then and that comes out very quickly, then it's something that I would pass up. So anyway, that's all I had to share. So I'll stop here, and maybe we have. I think we went a little bit over.